Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another interview series with the Wittmer Rejuvenation Clinic. Really excited to have you guys along the journey with us today. Today, we are introducing Kevin Ford, who is a client of the Wittmer Rejuvenation Clinic. And just really excited to get to know you a little bit today. Kevin, thank you so much for taking the time to jump on today.
Sure, no problem. Thanks for
Yeah.
having me. Looking
Yeah,
forward to
awesome,
this.
man. Well, how we always like to get this started is just kind of get to know you a little bit. So if you don't mind sharing a little bit about yourself, let's go ahead and start with your age and then kind of tell us a little bit about your personal life. And then we'll dive into some more things as the conversation goes.
Sure. Yeah, so I am 42 years old. I'll be 43 here in about a month and a half. So I was an athlete throughout, high school, college. Wrestling was my sport. I'm married. Been married for 19 years this
Awesome.
month. Got two kids, son that's 16, daughter's 11. What I do for work, I have two jobs. One, I'm in corporate safety at a utility company, and then my second job is my own business. That's online fitness coaching. So that's what I currently do. Obviously, the fitness side of things is my passion. I'm fascinated by the human body and optimizing the human body and making things. Making things that work efficiently around someone's special needs and what they like, I think is really enjoyable for me to do for clients. So,
Yeah.
and obviously, we'll talk about some of the things that Wittmer provides that absolutely helps
Right.
with that.
Yeah, awesome, man. That's one of my favorite parts of these conversations is talking to an athlete like yourself. I was a previous athlete. I was a football player, but it is really cool to talk to somebody that has that basis of what we call of our pyramid or our triangle of health, right? Which is, of course, the fitness side, the nutrition side, but then also the hormone optimization. And when the three of those work together, the results you can get personally is really inspiring. And so I'm excited for both of us to dive into that a little bit. So um, let's go ahead and start. I would like to talk about blood work. I think that's an important thing
Yeah.
for somebody like me and you to have conversation about. I know for me, I only got my blood work done 2 years ago. I just turned 37, so I was in my mid 30s when I got my
Okay.
blood work done. When was the first time you had your blood work done, and what was your experience with that?
Yes. So I would say that I started getting full blood work makeups. I would say probably I was probably about 33, and I pretty much will get a full panel done, full workup, I should say, at least twice a year, sometimes three.
Cool.
So,
And now was that through the
so I've been
yeah
doing it
was
for a
that through the
while.
clinic or was that through another route?
My primary care physician actually was more on the functional health side of
Awesome.
things. So they're not like your typical practitioner's office, and so they actually are pretty advanced in the functional aspect of things. So they ran a lot of blood markers that you generally will not get from a standard of care, prescription for blood work. So they're what they did was pretty comprehensive, which opened my eyes to some of the blood markers that had opportunities to be optimized for me. And of course, I think naturally men are problem solvers. And so for me, I'm maybe a little bit more than over average on that. And so I really wanted to see what I could do with nutrition, supplementation, to really optimize myself. It's kind of like a race car, right? You're going to tune that thing down to the finest degree in order to maximize your performance. So that's how I kind of look at it. But back to your question, yes, I was 33 or so, and it was a primary care physician, but I got
Yeah.
lucky. I know that that is not the case for the vast majority of people.
Yeah, you're totally right. Unfortunately, we hear too many stories where instead of going to blood work, they go to medications and things like that. My question then to follow up with
Sure.
that is, why did you get your blood work done? Why did you were lucky with the care provider that you had. What made you guys decide to go that route?
Yeah.
Were you feeling any symptoms or what was going on there?
So I was competing. Well, I didn't mention this in the intro, but I am an IFBB pro bodybuilder, and I went pro in classic physique, which is a division of the IFBB. And about the time when I first started getting my blood work, I was competing as a natural athlete in bodybuilding, and I just was curious, where my numbers were at. Was there an opportunity for me to get on TRT in order to help with my bodybuilding? Because obviously that was something that I really enjoyed doing, and I obviously took it to the furthest I could. But I wanted to see what my numbers were. I felt like after competition season, I was drugged down and just didn't necessarily feel right. And so I did. I went and got some blood work done. And at the very least, I always recommend getting it done so at least you have a baseline so that, hey, look, maybe you feel great right now, but maybe you're not going to feel great in 5 or 10 years. So let's get that blood work done now so that 5 or 10 years from now, at least you have a reference point to look back on to say, hey, look, I felt awesome back then. And here's where my numbers were at. Maybe we should try to get those numbers back to where they were when I remember distinctly that I felt good. So that's a sidebar. But yeah, so I wanted to see where I was at. And I did have some low testosterone. But at that point, I was actually able to just allow time to uh, get the levels back up again just because they were suppressed from, extreme dieting and just the rigmarole of contest prep for bodybuilding shows. But there obviously was a point where I did jump on TRT, and the blood work was the key for giving me the information I needed to make that
Yeah,
decision.
for sure. I think when I look back, I probably peaked out athletically and performance wise. I guess completely naturally then was, like my mid to late 20s. And I think if I have any regrets as far as
Hmm.
my journey so far, is I did wish I had those numbers to refer back to. I knew by the time I hit my mid 30s, like
Sure.
something didn't feel right. But I do think if there's anything I wish I could have done differently is, mid to late 20s when I was full of testosterone, I was working out all the time, I was really feeling good.
Yeah.
Hey, where are my normal, somewhat natural numbers currently at before the rest of my
Sure.
life kind of progressed? But that's great to hear. So then how did you eventually then go from your primary care physician and then transfer on more towards care with Wittmer? And what did that look like?
Yeah. So I actually went to high school with Dr. Whitmer's
Great.
kids. I ran into to Jeff at they had a booth set up at a CrossFit gym in Lake St. Louis, and I happened to stop by. A friend of mine, I would think was part owner in that gym, so I just stopped by just to support. And they had some bounce houses there, so my kids wanted to go jump, and it was
Yeah.
cool. They got us in there. So just had a conversation with him. Kept in touch, and then so he asked if I'd be interested to coming over and utilizing their services, and so I did. And that was probably about, I want to say that's probably about 4 or 5 years ago.
Awesome. And then what's kind of the biggest difference you saw from working with your primary care physician and then transferring over to Dr. Whitmer and his team?
I am, I got a busy schedule. I can make time for things, but the fact that I get everything sent to my house, I don't have to go into the office, and I can very easily get a voicemail that talks about the blood work that I recently had done, and if we're going to make any changes to my prescription, that works out really, really well for me. Obviously I've talked to Dr. Whitmer on the phone, but if I miss the call, I certainly appreciate the voicemail that's detailed and goes over, what the plan is moving forward. If we're making any changes, if everything looks good, if there's an area that I need to improve on. And so I do appreciate that, and that is way better for me than going into an office every 6 months. So.
Yeah, that's a great reason. I think unfortunately there's a little bit of misconception with how the telemed system works. And, are you talking to a
Hmm.
real doctor? Are they, all the different things
Sure.
that unfortunately the stigma is around that. I think it is great
Right.
that Whitmer does do the extra work. And I've had those same voicemails as you were mentioning, where I can, jump on, and he always finishes the voicemail with, if you have any questions or want to talk more, please reach back out,
Right.
and you can always have
Yep.
that conversation. Another thing that I've really enjoyed
Right.
personally about the Wittmer Clinic and my experience so far is they ask more about how you feel and not just looking at the data, right?
Yep.
And you're a smart
Yep.
guy. I
That's a
can
great
tell
point.
that you enjoy this kind of stuff. You love learning about it and things like that. So when you look at it personally and you
Yep.
get your numbers and you've been doing this for almost 10 years, 5 years for sure with the clinic. When you
Right.
get those numbers and you start thinking about the conversation with doc, can you talk to us a little bit more about, kind of what you go through and what you think, and then what that conversation looks like? Then when you go ahead and pass that conversation on to Dr. Wittmer.
Yeah, so I'm pretty well educated. I've taken many courses and studied a lot on blood markers, how to optimize. Obviously there's genetic components that will vary across the board. We're all born with a set of genetics, and some of those genes we can affect through nutrition and things, but others sometimes you're just dealt with those cards. And so I get my blood work. It's sent to me, a copy of it sent to me prior to Dr. Wittmer calling, and I always look over it myself. I know where my numbers are at. I know where they're generally high. I do have some genetic, I'll just call them issues that cause certain markers to be elevated and whatnot. But I'm aware of those things, and so there's certain markers that I'm looking for to see if what recently I did with my nutrition, my cardiovascular training, my resistance training has actually helped in the areas that I was really trying to focus on. Um, and so I'll get that information back, and I'll know. I kind of already will know what the conversation is going to be, or at least what the voicemail is going to be like. And if if there's anything that I didn't suspect, then obviously I take that in. But I personally haven't have been able to be pretty steady and consistent with my dosages and the medications that I'm taking for the last 4 or 5 years now.
That's great.
So
And so then, you mentioned you have some clients and things like that. I'm sure this is a route you suggest to those clients as far as getting their blood work done, seeing where they're at, and then
yes,
kind of progressing to that. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about, how you go about that with your clients?
yeah. So the biggest disclaimer is I'm not a doctor, right? So I do know doctors, and I do know what those conversations might need to look like. I inform my clients of how they should ask the questions that they want to from the doctor in order to get the answers, not necessarily the answers that they want, but get the questions answered that they're looking
Mhm.
for, so they can make informed decisions. And I would say that generally it's just kind of a conversation where we look at their blood work. Clearly, on any blood panel that you get, there's always going to be a standard medical range. You're going to be a low and a high, right? And most of the times you want to be in the middle of the road for most blood markers. Thyroid, maybe you want a little bit higher. That lets you a little bit more food. Testosterone, a little bit higher, of course. But regardless of that, you talk about the standard medical range, but then most importantly, I'd say more important than whether or not you fall in a standard medical range is how you feel. I think all too often people get fixated on this number. And I've looked at lots and lots of blood work, and I've got guys that compete, and I've got guys that compete, into their 50s, and I will say that I've got some guys that in their 50s have higher total and free testosterone than some of my competitors that are in their 30s, or some of my lifestyle clients that are in their 30s. But those in their 30s might have a lot more energy. And so, sometimes there's a component of age that we just can't dodge and we can't run away from. But after, messing around maybe with dosages, after having those conversations, because I do obviously refer my clients to Dr. Wittmer, and they'll work to optimize those things, which in most cases they're able to help with some of those. But yeah, I'll walk through the blood work, I'll educate them on it, and then say, hey, look, this is something that you're going to have to think about. If you feel like the symptoms that you have right now, you'd really like to improve those, and we've already tried nutrition, we've already improved your movement and exercise, and we're still not to a point where you're satisfied with your energy levels, your performance, your strength, your muscle, then I think maybe then you want to go and have a conversation. You're obviously a candidate based on your blood work alone, but taking symptoms into account, hey, this is a decision that you'll have to make and have that conversation with the
Yeah.
doctor.
That's great, and I think that's something that was important to me. I'm similar to you. I love looking over blood work. I've been fortunate where my wife's gotten blood work, and some other of my friends, so I've been able to see kind of where they're
Yeah.
at and things like that. But I
Yep.
think one of my favorite parts about the clinic is it's not just about, okay, we got you in the range that maybe we were hoping for. It's always followed up with, but how
Right.
do you feel? Because I know for me, when I first
Right.
started, they are smart about it. They're not just going to pump you with a bunch of stuff. So Dr. Wittmer suggested a low dose right here out of the gate to get that started. And so after the low dose
Yep.
started, then from there I was able to kind of progress. But the first question he asked me after my numbers did progress a little bit was, okay, awesome, we're going the right direction, but how do you feel? Do you feel better? Are your mental clarity better? Is your libido better? All the other warning signs that come along with it. And so I definitely wanted to touch
Sure.
on that just one more time. I think you did a great job elaborating on that, where it's not always about the numbers, right? It can be about how do
Yep.
I feel,
Sure.
because we're all different, based on our genetic makeup and things like that. And so I think that was a great point to
Yeah.
bring up. So kind of on to the next thing. That
I do have
Yeah,
one more
go ahead,
point.
please,
Let me make one
please.
more point. Sorry. So I coach most of my clients are lifestyle clients, meaning they do not compete. Um, and I will say that for my female clients that are, say, perimenopause and they're very active, oftentimes a lot of women will want to continue on with those hormones that they're used to utilizing and that help them to optimize their life and really enjoy the active lifestyle. And so I've definitely referred, several of my clients in that late 40s, early 50s range, and based on the symptoms going in and what they have experienced after, their treatments, and their prescriptions and stuff. We saw vast improvements not only on, their performance, but also in their body composition. So, of course, a lot of other markers have been improved as well. So I think oftentimes people just think of testosterone, but there's much more to it than that. And especially for females, having a period is not a bad thing. It gives that sense of youthfulness, and I don't know what it's like, never have, but I think that for an active female, it's not necessarily something you want to run away from. And so continuing on with those same hormones that has allowed you to be very active and strong and fit and whatever other experiences you've had with those things, maybe you don't have to stop that. So just another
Yeah, no,
thought.
that's a great point. And I think that, we run into those stories a lot where, people can't figure out maybe in their late 30s, 40s, 50s, man, I used to be so active and I used to be able to just, drop that 5 pounds really easily. But now I do the
Right.
same things and it doesn't happen. If anything, sometimes I feel worse. Like, what's going on? I'm telling you guys, 99% of the time, you need to get your blood work done, because there's been some changes in your body
Yeah.
and your hormones that's no longer allowing your metabolism to work the same. As you mentioned, with some of the other
Yeah.
levels, whether it's your thyroid, DHEA, there's a lot of education there that we can continue to spread. But as we continue to finish up here, so you were talking about the age range of clients, and I think that we touched on a little bit at the
Hmm.
beginning of our conversation around, when we were in our younger days. I kind of wish I would have had my blood work. You were talking about some older clients that you have. I would love for you to just elaborate on blood work as a whole. You know, it's going to be
Hmm.
assumed that we want them to do it early and do it late at any time, but let's talk a little bit more about the details around that. I'd love
Yeah.
to hear just a little bit more of your experience there.
Yeah, so I would say, in general, what I typically see. I mean, first of all, what type of person reaches out to hire a fitness coach, right? Not everybody is going
Great
to do
question. Great.
that. So generally, those people have made up their mind that they want help. They're not happy with how they look, how they feel, their performance, what have you. So once that person gets to that point, um, most of the time, I don't have any issues with them getting blood work done. And we are able to at least see where they're at as a baseline and really address things in general. So, for instance, there's many inflammatory markers that we can see in blood work. We can see inflammation from obviously elevated glucose, from a fasted insulin that's elevated. Cortisol, if it's elevated in the morning, that could obviously be a sign of stress, which all that stuff rolls into
Mhm.
inflammation. And so in many of those cases, we could just utilize nutrition to help improve those functions. But if those boxes are checked and they're good in those inflammation areas, and we go on to see that, for a lot of females, we see a lot of estrogen dominance because of, long-term birth control usage. We see such a high elevation of estrogen and such a low amount of progesterone that they're just stuck in this estrogen dominant state, which makes it extremely difficult to lose weight. And so you've got to take an approach to help with that. There's generally a stress component to that as well. Oftentimes there's gut issues that are downstream effect from that as well. But those are some indicators of things that you can do, not just with nutrition, but oftentimes you can utilize, you know, hormone therapies as well. Maybe not a permanently thing, but maybe just for a season to kind of help bridge the time frame that it takes to get to that said goal where we bring levels back. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's not uncommon for me to see almost every male out of range, or at least on the low end of range for at least testosterone. Um, Men seem to have a bit more resilience, or a significant amount more resilience when it comes to stress
Mhm.
hormones and the inflammation markers versus females. Men are just able to deal with stress a little bit better. So some of those effects that we see in those areas with the inflammation is generally less for males. But because of the unfortunate society that we live in today, the cards are really stacked up against men in regards to having good optimal hormone, testosterone levels more specifically. We've got all these endocrine disruptors out there, the plastics, the phytoestrogens that are out there. All those things are waging
Yeah.
war on our testosterone. The high stress jobs that we have certainly plays a role in that as well. But um, it's not uncommon to see most of the guys that I get as clients that are, I would say, over 30 to be on the lower end, if not off of the low end. But yeah, that's kind of where the blood work is utilized, and there's some other quick, easy markers that you can look at as well for optimal health. Like vitamin D is important for
Mhm.
hormones as well. Just to name a few.
Yeah, that's a great answer, man. You covered all spectrums. That was awesome. I really enjoyed that. The last thing you kept mentioning that I did want to
Sure.
bring up before we close out here is you kept talking about inflammation markers. What do you mean by that?
Yeah.
Like, dive in a little bit more about like inflammation, how it plays a part, and how it affects your clients, and maybe even you potentially.
Well, there's some good inflammation and there's bad inflammation, right? So inflammation will just kind of let's talk about like a sports injury, right? You break your leg, you twist your knee or something. All this water kind of rushes to that area and it swells up, and we've got inflammation, which is part of the healing process, right? Because it's damaged, it's not the way that it's supposed to be. Well, we damage our organs and our internals by stress. We damage that with poor food choices. And so just like having to heal your knee, you don't put the stressors on it that you normally would. You're not going to run on it. You're not going to jog on it. You might not even walk on it. You might get in a wheelchair for a while in order to help relieve the stress on that knee and allow the healing process to take place, which is not overnight. And so, when we talk about bringing down inflammation, it's not an overnight thing. Oftentimes, people are impatient and they don't have the discipline to follow through with a low inflammatory diet that will help keep keep the stress off of the internals, like you're keeping the stress off that knee as it's trying to heal. And so, chronic inflammation is something that is affecting so many people, especially in America, just because, mainly because of the high stress. I mean, we get anxiety from social media, we know that. But the high stress, the terrible food that's available to us, and poor food choices, which is completely everyone's responsibility, and people have to own that. But but it's food that we're not necessarily meant to process. And so just like that knee was damaged because you moved it a way that it wasn't supposed to move, right? You ate stuff that you're not supposed to eat, and maybe you did that for years or decades. And we got to get off that knee. We got to get things healed up. And so that's probably one of the easier ways to, to verbalize what I think of when I think of inflammation.
Yeah,
So
great answer. I think that, as you mentioned, inflammation is important for the healing process, but like when it's inflamed for long periods of time, that's where it's uncomfortable. That's where it's actually probably more
yeah,
painful. As you mentioned with the knee, like it's tight to bend it, it hurts to walk on it, stuff like that. Like at some point, the healing
sure,
process needs to take over, and that inflammation needs to start going down. And you did a great
sure.
job elaborating on that. So, well, great job today, Kevin. Is there any last thoughts you'd like to share with anybody as we go ahead and finish this one out?
I would say, I would say that, own your own health.
Mm,
I think that it's super important to do that. There's no health handouts, right? Maybe there's money handouts, but there's no health handouts anywhere. So you got to own it. Nobody else is going to own it for you. Nobody's going to gift you health. They can't. It's not. And so the sooner you own your own health, the better you're going to be. So I would say take ownership of your health. Share knowledge that you get about optimizing your health with others. Don't keep it a secret. Share it freely, and point people in the right direction to get help if they need it.
great answer, man. Well, we appreciate you jumping on today, and we look forward to catching up with you again soon, Kevin.
All right, sounds good. Thanks.
Yeah.